This is the ISG Digital Dish.
Welcome to the Digital Dish,
a podcast for women's voices and perspectives in the digital world. I'm Lois.
I'm Missy.
And I'm Jeannie. And we want to make sure smart women and their points of view were being heard. Welcome back, everybody.
Hey.
Hi, Lois. Hi, Missy.
Hey, Jeannie.
So today we have our CDO, our Chief Data Officer, interviewing Namratha Dharshan, who's a director. I think you know Namratha, Lois.
Yeah.
Talking about a lot of different things about tech in India and the impact on women in India. But I thought we'd take this intro to really talk briefly of like pros and cons for COVID, because she starts with talking about COVID. So what's your thoughts about how COVID impacted women in tech?
I can't wait to hear this. I actually recently heard a statistic that said, so I wonder if this is going to debunk or confirm that COVID set women in the workforce in general back to like the 90s, which is bad. I know. So I don't know if that's the same in tech, because I thought there was a lot of silver lining. We weren't traveling as much, right? We were staying home. So I'm curious.
Well, that doesn't surprise me, and specifically, especially in India, because at the time I had a large part of my team in India during COVID. And the fact that there was such strict requirements that you could not leave your house or apartment, and only one person could leave at a certain part of the day to get groceries, and they had to come right back. And so many of the women who I would work with literally were at the same time, feeding their children or trying to care for them while they're also working, and they're there all day. So there was no break, and it was just so hard. So I wouldn't be shocked, I guess, that many women had to leave the workforce or take a leave of absence, or had to give up the big job in order to do something that they could actually manage with so much other stress on them. So I bet that's what happened. I'm guessing.
It will be very interesting to hear this at the end of it. We'll meet and sort of review what she actually said. So that's pretty cool. And I can't give anything away because, of course, I heard it because I was producing it. But the other thing she does talk about with Kathy, is the challenges organizations have on the flexibility in the workplace. Because now that we're supposedly coming out of it, so there's another pros and cons situation. So some companies are saying, okay, we're just going to keep this flexibility, or you have to come back to the office. What's your thought on that one? I mean, it's hard for us because we always work from home.
Yeah, but I think there's, even as someone who's worked from home for, I don't know, at least 10, 15 years, there is a part of going into an office with people and the energy it gives you. And so I think flexibility has a different kind of a word. I think the word work from home is replaced by work from anywhere, right? And however it makes sense for you to work. So that's a very different concept than what they had to support before.
Yeah.
It's really about your mental health and your emotional well-being. Work from anywhere is spot on. Work from home is a little stereotypical. Even like the return to work, when some people never stopped working, they worked so much, it was more of a return to office.
Right.
And it's a hybrid from home or office, because if you don't have oxytocin, eye contact with another human, your mental health is going to dip. Some people got too much oxytocin at home and they want to go into an office.
Get me away from this constant oxytocin.
And then some people got none at all. It's, just them, in my case, plants. And so you want to get into the office, or vice versa. So, it just depends. But that flexibility is what it's really all about, and the autonomy to make the decision about the dynamic that works best for you.
So I think this is going to be interesting because she is talking about women in tech in India. So the cultural differences, I think, will have an impact. So we will see. So everybody, enjoy this interview.
Hi, it's Kathy Rudy. I'm Chief Data Officer at ISG, and with me today is Namratha Dharshan. Director and Principal Analyst of our ISG Research team. And Namratha and I know each other more recently as co-hosts of the ISG Index. And we really started to get to know each other through the index and working together on how we're going to represent the sourcing industry and market on a quarterly basis. But we thought today it'd be interesting to talk about the role of women in IT in India. And Namratha is a great example of that. So, hey, Namratha, do you want to say hi to everybody and introduce yourself?
Thank you, Kathy. Yes, it's an absolute pleasure to be here. My name is Namratha Dharshan. As Kathy mentioned, I'm the Director and Principal Analyst. I've been a part of the research group for the last 8 years and been at ISG also almost close to 8 years. I've been in the industry of market research, specifically focused on IT for the last 17 and a half years. So I'm really looking forward to having conversations with you.
Yeah, me too. 17 and a half years. Now, that's something I did not know. I know when I came up through the industry being in technology, there weren't a lot of women. And I wonder what you experienced in India as you started your career 17 years ago.
Yes, I would say that I did a lot of different research. It wasn't just IT. I did have a little bit of consumer research, but I think about 4 or 5 years into my career, IT started shaping up very strongly in India. India became a very, very important market for the sourcing. And once that kind of started picking up, gradually there were more and more market research firms that were focusing on IT industry. And then I started off taking care of a couple of markets. One is, of course, the cloud, and then I started looking at the software, and then gradually moved into services. So I was mostly into primary research, and that gave me a lot of exposure into different aspects of technology. Subsequently, I started looking at IoT, and then machine to machine back then was like one of the terms. And, we were doing a lot of research around M2M, and then subsequently IoT, and then ISG happened, and then there was no turning back. Like, I'm so deep into IT research right now. I just don't think I can think of anything else outside of IT research.
And lucky for you, it changes all the time and there's always something new. So I think it would be an exciting field to be in research. It's not like you're, researching a bacteria. Well, maybe that's exciting to some people, but IT is always changing.
Yes.
So how have things changed in terms of the role that you see for women in technology as well as in the jobs that you've had? So when you started out, were there a lot of other women in research and IT, or did that sort of happen along the way? What do you think now?
No, there's definitely, I think from a ratio standpoint between the male and female in the IT research, the gap was definitely there, even when I started off. But I think gradually, the gaps have started to close. Especially, one of the key things I would like to highlight over here is the developers. Developers in India was so skewed towards the male market, but now you see actually a very nice balance between female and male in the market. So over a period of time, there's no doubt that there are more and more women getting into this. Also, the technology is expanding so much. There's so much to do. Particularly, I think I would like to focus on the startup market in India. There's so many startups, and there's so many forums encouraging women in startups, women in tech. So there are dedicated forums, there are dedicated communities, thanks to the power of social media. So there's a lot more focus on women, and they can use platforms. And most importantly, I think, we should be thankful to COVID as well. There's so many talented women who could not work either because they had, newborns or younger kids, and they couldn't come back into the job. But I think the work from home option has been so helpful. Just to give you a quick stat, in our own organization, we're almost 50-50 in terms of male and female in ISG India research. And that itself speaks highly of how many women are now able to work from home, and they're actually living their dreams of being back into IT research or being back in the IT industry. So things are changing. Things are definitely changing. It was not so interesting a few years back. But now just to see so many women, either they're founders of new startups or founders, CEOs of different companies, and more news about it, more in social media, more in the physical papers. It's good to see that progress for sure.
That's amazing. When you think of the startup culture, going back to that, is it just very easy for women to? It's easy it would be, I guess, for a man to start up a company and become established. Like there's no barriers or boundaries. It's just very accepted. Is that how it works now?
Yes, it's. I think the culture is definitely changing.
Hmm.
I have my friends in my own friend circle where so many women are actually starting on their own. It could be IT research or it could be a financial company. Even for that matter, it's amazing to see how some of the women are just using the power of social media to innovate from their houses. They,
Right.
whether it's putting up a cookie show or cooking show, or putting up another show. I think that's amazing how they're leveraging every channel to kind of transform.
Hmm.
Yes, the things have definitely improved.
Like from the ground up, like in the US, I know that we have a lot of activity around STEM. So getting girls involved in science, technology, engineering, and math. Has that been a focus in the culture in India as well, as really working to encourage women into the technology field?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's almost a joke, I would say. So when I go back to my education days, my father gave me only two options. And back then, all kids who were studying had only two options: either you become an engineer or you become a doctor. There was no other option.
Uh-huh.
And since I was not inclined towards biology, my father said then it has to be engineering. So we were given only two options. Of course, now we have so many different careers. Like, art was probably not looked upon as a career. How can art even be a career stream? So I think culturally, STEM is like beaten into our system right from the beginning. So it has to be maths. Like, how can you score so less in maths, or how can you score less in computer science?
Right.
That is the kind of conversations that happen even today in Indian household. There's uber importance to maths. Mathematics is like a big subject. Somebody scoring very well in mathematics is like considered as a big thing.
The other thing I wanted to ask you about, because I know, and I don't know the exact statistic, but it's very low. So women, the percentage of funding they get from VC, firms is really low. Do you know anything about how it works in India? Are women able to, do some good fundraising for their startups, or is it really more of a grassroots?
I wouldn't have any statistic to support as well at this point, but I can say that India is being looked upon as one of the innovation hubs. There's a lot of innovation that is happening. There are a lot of startups mushrooming here. So, in my opinion, I think there's more weightage given to something that's a groundbreaking, a breakthrough technology that's going to revolutionize things. It's very also interesting to see how men are also into startups that actually is more dedicated to let's say women health products, or women empowerment. So that is also a nice change to see, that it's not just women who are focusing, but it's also men who are also equally focusing on the empowerment of women. But in my opinion, I think it's more importance that's being given to innovation as opposed to whether it's a man led startup or a woman led startup.
So there's just a lot of innovation and entrepreneurialism in general in India around technology.
Yes.
It's pretty interesting. What has been your experience in the differences in the work-life balance between men and women, and how do you think companies are accommodating that? I mean, you mentioned COVID as being a really a change up. It changed everything up. It showed people could work from home, and it opened up opportunities for women. Do you think there's other differences that need to be thought about for women in business or women in technology than men, or not?
I think invariably a woman has lot many more responsibilities compared to a man, whether it's with kids or running a household and many of such things. I mean, the first of, I think, giving that relaxation in terms of how we work, the flexibility to work from home, and the mandate to not be in office in itself is a breather for a lot of women. I have a couple of team members that I was talking to in my own team who said that, I'm able to now drop my kid, or I'm able to pick up my kid. I'm able to kind of have that work-life balance. But if you call me to office every single day, that's going to make it very difficult. And, so much so that I might have to even think about, taking up a contractual work so that I can work I have some flexible working conditions, right? So that speaks volumes as well. I think one is to have that conscious attempt in terms of all organizations consciously thinking about how do they balance it out, and being more empathetic towards, how's your working condition. So how can can you come into the office? Offering that flexibility becomes very important. And second thing is, even if they have to come to the office, just having an environment where, I don't know, they can probably bring kids. I know offices are also thinking about having daycares very close to their office or within the office premises, where women feel that they're comfortable, that okay, the kids are somewhere close by and they can still kind of manage some of these small things. But I think it's very important to start thinking holistically to see how they can actually, how women don't feel that okay, I have to take the entire load, or I have to give up my career just because I can't manage both. I think anything that we can do to support them will be super important.
I think you're right. I know for myself, I would never have been able to manage my career without an employer that was super flexible.
Yeah.
I mean, I had flexibility from work from home for a long time, flexibility in hours, and you just have to trust as long as you get the job done. And I think women, we kill it. We do everything we can
Yeah.
to really make sure that we've got everything covered.
Right.
And I think a lot of us, well, I'm going to say for myself,
Yeah.
I would have been a bad full-time mother. I mean, I needed to work. I've got a busy mind. I think my kids and my family was way better off for me working. And I
Yes.
think the companies I worked for were way better off for allowing me that flexibility. So I think you're right. You're spot on.
Yeah.
Employers really need to think about a way to accommodate women, not as an accommodation but really accommodate them so they can thrive, because we will deliver. We
Yeah.
always deliver.
Yes.
Definitely. How do you go about finding female talent for ISG? I mean, you must be looking and trying to recruit. What has your experience been there, bringing new women into the firm?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I am very conscious about having a right balance when it comes to diversity. In fact, I have a team which is completely women, and I'm consciously hiring men now. And then there are, there are teams, of course, where I have more men, and now I'm looking at women. In fact, I did sound it off to the HR that it's very important that I have diversity in the team. It's not completely women or it's not completely men, and we need that healthy balance, right? So specifically for certain roles where I have a lot of men, I've consciously told them, let's try and find only women here,
Mm-hmm.
or in some cases, let's try and find men. So as I'm trying to interview, I'm also trying to sort of prioritize. Plus, I think it's kind of helped break a bias in my mind as well, that oh, what if she cannot come into office? Or all of those things have also kind of gone, and now we are much more open. Let's go beyond Bangalore. If we can't find a woman in Bangalore, then let's go beyond. Let's see out the entire country, because now we have the remote working, and we have the flexibility. So I think it's helped us to cast a wider net and start looking at how we can break this bias, and then how can we bring a very healthy culture of diversity in the organization.
That's so interesting that you say that we've learned the bias ourselves, and we have to be conscious of that bias, and we have to break the bias in our own minds.
Yeah.
It's just something that we've learned, and we need to unlearn, even as women, not to have the same bias that we might have felt would have been something only a male would have, but not necessarily. So we have to open ourselves up as well. That's a really interesting thought. Um, Anything else you want to share about the role of women in technology in India? Think that you think we should know or think about?
I think the only other thought that I have is that, though I would have completely, in through and through our interview, we would have said that a lot of things have improved. It's not necessary that it's all completely hunky dory. There are still issues. There are still biases in the mind. For example, if she's pregnant, will she even get back to work? Can she manage both work and home? There are a lot of things like that. It's still, there are challenges in whether it's pay or whether it is giving that equal attention. And most importantly, I think we need to also consciously brew a culture to empower more women to scale up the leadership ladder. And that's probably where, as a nation, we probably lag. And we kind of have to sort of push people to empower more and more women to kind of scale that ladder. I think somewhere every woman will have a stage where they will take it easy in their career because of either young kids or whatever. But I think just being able to support them to see how they can scale to the leadership role, that's probably one place where we need to kind of work towards to see more and more women leaders, more and more women CEOs or women founders. I think that's interesting. Though there are communities and though there are social media forums and everywhere that's kind of promoting, and it's actively happening. I'm sure in pockets there are also challenges which will require continuous working to kind of empower that.
When you're talking about, equal pay, not a lot of women in leadership, these are global challenges, right? It's not just India, it's not just the US. They're global challenges and things that we need to really consciously work on collectively as global women in leadership. Hopefully one day we will see the balance and we'll make changes. But I think we are, slowly, hopefully we're making those changes.
Yes.
All right. Well, you know what, Namratha, it's been great talking to you. It's been great learning about your career and how you got into IT. And really, I think what I've learned is that the challenge for women is a global challenge, and we all face the same thing. We've got a common sisterhood, not just in IT, but it's in the roles that we play in the world of work in general. So I really appreciate your time, and I hope we can chat again soon.
Thank you, Kathy. No, it's been a pleasure. And I'm so glad that we have a forum like this where we can actually exchange thoughts. This has been exciting. Thank you very much.
Hey, first of all, that was such a great interview. It was surprising. It was exciting to hear. I think Kathy did an amazing job. But I want to start with two things. One, happy International Women's Month. And then the other thing is I wanted to bring up when we did our intro on this, we talked about, I asked you guys, how do you think COVID impacted the women in India? What was the impact? And I know, Missy, you talked about some statistics saying it set women back to the 90s.
That's right.
And Lois, you said, let's see, you'd be shocked if it didn't have negative effects. So now that you've heard the interview, what's your thoughts?
We were wrong. At least for specifically in India, that is amazing because I personally felt like COVID was a silver lining because we are in consulting, we're on planes and off planes and just getting so much time back. But to hear Namratha talk about women using digital platforms and different medias to propel themselves as a platform to talk about anything from cooking in the kitchen to home life and just having so many more opportunities now to prove that you can work from anywhere and get the work done if you've got the right environment.
100%. And I think we talked about flexibility and cultural impacts, and this is certainly a reflection of it. I'm sorry, Lois, what were you going to say?
So, I've been to India, at least to Bangalore, not to a lot of India, but I very much resonated, and I haven't been back there since COVID, but the traffic, for anybody who's been there, the traffic is horrendous, and the commute that so many people had, just trying to get into the office was a huge part of their day. And it hadn't really dawned on me that the fact that they're now working at home, the amount of time that they then got back.
Right.
Now, they probably worked more hours than maybe that they did before, but kind of the light bulb went on about how women then didn't have this big commute to get in, and then they're far away from their families. And now the flexibility that it offered them, because they had to figure out, one, they had to figure out how to do it, but two, the culture around them, took a big giant leap forward to say, wait a minute, women can do all these things and they can be on top of the things that they need to do. Plus, they have the ability to do that work without trying to be put into all of those boxes. So I thought that was really enlightening. I thought it was great.
Yeah. I love how Kathy related it to her raising her kids and saying, I could not have done this. You think about it. Kathy is the chief data officer of our company. She's able to do it. And I think we have to think about how to get women into leadership is to offer them the flexibility. And I know that's a cultural change for a lot of places. And yes, I've been to India, but I also live in Chicago. And I'll tell you, the traffic here is not a whole lot better.
It is not.
Okay, it is because, yeah. But the fact is that commute sucks up a big part of your day. So if you have the ability to be flexible, I think it really does make a huge difference for women. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
One thing else that really, really resonated with me, number one, Kathy should be a regular guest host for us because she did such an amazing job.
She did.
But when she was talking about the amount of women in technology in STEM in India, because Namratha said it was beaten into us. It's like you've got two options.
I know.
Is it math or is it medicine?
I know.
You're going engineering or are you going to go be a doctor? And she's like, well, I don't like science, so I guess I'm going to go the math route. Well, of course, then it was like, oh, and I'm coming from a background where I worked for the Department of Labor and the Employment and Training Administration in the Office of Foreign Labor Certification. So America, for at least 2 decades that I can attest to, has benefited from India having a higher focus on STEM. And then women there have a higher concentration because those were your two options. Whereas we're like, I'm going to do sports and English and a whole bunch of other stuff
or art. She mentioned art. Yeah.
And so you fast forward to not being in the Department of Labor, but seeing the effects of it. It's such an aha moment for me was, oh, that is why we didn't necessarily focus our education. We're behind, and just getting girls involved in STEM, but that was the option. So that was really eye-opening for me.
It was, wasn't it?
And what about the statistic? She said that the research department at ISG is 50-50 men and women. How amazing is that, right? And this is IT research.
Yay!
And that is because I'm sure of that huge concentration of education and in STEM. And now it's, really equated to that sort of parity between, men and women, which is just absolutely fantastic. We can learn so much, just that attention that parents and the community can have on women, boys and girls going into STEM and the advances that's going to make. It really is just a great model for us to look at.
Completely. And now she's trying to hire more men. I love that. She's like, I don't want it to get out of balance. I love the fact that she's aware of her own bias and saying, hey, let's make sure I keep this even. I love that. Didn't you? Yeah, Missy's going, yes.
Only because I think about, there's this idea of affirmative action with hiring minorities in America. And I've never really thought about the reverse, I won't say reverse racism that could happen, but I've never thought about as the reverse, just unconscious bias of any kind, where you have this saturation. I think of, Beyonce as a performer. Bear with me, I'm going somewhere with this. I promise. And you
can't go wrong if you mention Beyonce in a podcast. I'm saying, Missy, go ahead.
Yes. Okay. So Beyonce is famous for having an all-girl band no matter what. Like, she doesn't care. She's like, I'm only going to hire women when I have as many female dancers. Men have been in rock and roll and pop culture so no matter what, that is very intentional bias because she's leveling up that parity. But here, making sure that you still have diversity of thought And that's what equity and diversity and inclusion is truly about, not just saying, I am going to use this platform and put any woman in a role, but you still want the best person in the role and to get the right mix of diversity of thought in general, which is a good reminder for all of us.
Well, and not only that, she also talked about the barriers to the female startups are loosening, and that was exciting to hear too. And I think it's all part of the same thing. It's like, okay, we've seen what women can do when we give them the flexibility and the support and the culture that they need. And then let's see what they can do in startups. So that was really exciting to me too, to hear, because I know still here, Kathy was talking about the VCs aren't giving, the venture capitalists aren't giving necessarily money to women startups. And this is an example of where in India they are. And that was pretty interesting.
And I think the other thing too is what I'm so grateful for our global economies now, and the fact that there's so many people who have moved from India to the U.S. There's people from the U.S. who moved to Europe to, we're moving around. And I think the benefit of that is the things that Namratha talked about that's in India. We're seeing that also coming into IT, also coming into like the US as well. And I think over time, really India is going to be, and the women of India are going to be one of those pieces who I think will help many other countries kind of get up that ladder because of that focus. And I think they're really going to be game changers for all of us. And that to me is really exciting.
Yeah, exactly. And last but not least, I love how she talked about men are empowering the women to help with this balance, and they're being allies and they're seeing what they can bring. And there are still challenges in leadership, but where she's in and what she's seen is that the men are actually supporting this because they know that they could benefit them.
Awesome.
So happy International Women's Month. I don't know if it's a month, but I'm making it.
We're making it a month.
Thanks, everybody. Nice to talk to you.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks for listening. If you like our podcast, please subscribe and rate and review us. Thank you.